We're back in the bus up today, folks. We're going all the way back to something we've talked about in a previous session last year. But I'm bringing it back up because, quite frankly, I keep having the same conversation. So I'm hoping that we can kind of take the lid off this and talk about the letter E. And you're probably thinking, what does that got to do with anything? Well, this is where, when you start into this work, one of the things that you quickly learn, or someone says, is that letters don't make sounds. Letters make graphemes, and it's the graphemes that make the phonemes in the words. And you're probably thinking, because I thought the same thing, what difference does it make? The difference is this. Our students need to understand that in words, there are graphemes that make phonemes, but there are also other letters that have a different job, and that's okay. So it doesn't make it weird or irregular or a jail word or any of those other ridiculous things that we call words in our classrooms. It's a totally normal feature of English spelling that there are sometimes letters in a word that don't make a sound. Now, if they don't make a sound anywhere in the word family, they're a marker. Now, they could be an etymological marker or an orthographic marker. Like, we don't care, but we're just going to call them a marker. And their job could be anything. Their job could be something related to pronunciation. Their job could be related to, we're going to talk about this, something lexical. So rather than a content word or a function word. So it could have a job that way. It could be a little flag to say, hey, guess what? I used to be spelt with this letter and I'm not anymore, but the letter remains. And so that historical connection can live inside the word. Okay, so English spelling is so much more than grapheme phoneme correspondence. There is more information that we can glean once we dig into the letters or the spelling of a word. So today we're talking about final single non-syllabic E. This final single non-syllabic E is called this or referred to as this because it's final. It's at the end of the word. It's single, not like looking for a date, but single in the sense that it is not part of a digraph. And it's non-syllabic because it's not forming a syllable. We sometimes call this magic E, silent E, bossy E. It goes by many, many personas. The technical name for it is final single non-syllabic E. Now, that's a mouthful to say every time. So we can just call this marker E. Okay? Marker E is very common. It is, in fact, the most common orthographic marker in the English language. Marker E can serve more than one purpose. And here's where we get ourselves in trouble. When we only tell a single part of a story or a definition related to, in this case, an orthographic marker, but in other cases, a prefix or a suffix. If we only say this means this or this does this, every time we see that letter or that prefix or suffix doing something else, it is now said to be irregular, oddball, not following the rules. When in fact, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. We just didn't tell the whole story. So I don't want you to panic. It's a little shift in language. So instead of saying the job of bossy E is this, we're going to say a job of the E is this. Now, its job doesn't always involve bossing things around. So that might be something to consider of why we would shift it to be called a marker E, because eventually you're going to look at other words that have other markers. So the L in walk is not a bossy L. It's a marker L, connecting it to its original Old English spelling, as well as, did I say walk or talk? Because now I've forgotten.
Walk.
Walk. So it's related to Old English welcome. So the L in there that's what it's there for. There was an L in the original spelling. Now there's an L in the current spelling. Okay. So marker E, that's what we're going to call this thing. Now, many of you are familiar with this bossy E. I put this link in here for this fun video. I won't play it because we don't have time, quite frankly. But most of us are familiar. Most of us are familiar with the job of marker E being phonological. So CVCE words are an example of this. What is the E doing? It's making the vowel say its own name. It's the bossy E. Okay, so we have examples like ride, theme, cope, bake. The E in these examples is forcing or causing the vowel to be long. Okay, that is legitimately a thing that E does. But it's not the only thing that E does. Oh, there's more. Okay. Other things that E does includes phonologically softening the C. So instead of making a k sound, it's making a s sound. So what is the E doing in voice? Well, it's making the C soft. And police and dance and face and voice and service and once. Those are not odd words because the E is not making the vowel say its name. It's just another job that E has. It can also make soft G's. It almost sounded like soft cheese, but that was weird. Great question. Does binge belong in this conversation? Absolutely does, and it would fit right here. Because the G is not a G sound, it's a J sound. And so binge would fit on this list, that the E in binge is there because it's making the G soft. So there are times when marker E absolutely does a job related to sound and pronunciation. Another example of its contribution to sound and pronunciation is in a voiced TH. So the difference between bath and bathe, teeth, claw, clothe, loathe, breath, breathe. Okay, so not breath, it was breathe. But that voice TH, the E, that's what the E is doing there. Now, I don't have examples of this right now, but there are times when E does more than one job, and I'm going to talk about that in this. Yeah, Lana, absolutely, right? If that's why that was confusion when I dropped the E and it looked like binging, I was like, that's weird. Now, the other thing that I think is important to point out is that when we're doing when we're adding a voweled suffix with this marker E on the end, the suffix is really landing in front of the E. We know the E is still there and influencing the pronunciation. We just don't see it. Kind of like when we build out the number 15, 10 is still there. The 5 just dropped in front of the 0. Do you know what I mean? In place value. Okay, now there's also the job of marker E related to structural pieces. So the job of E in these words is related to spelling conventions. And we know that complete English content words can't end in the letter V, and they can't end in the letter U. So in order to stop that from happening, we slap an E on the end. So give and have are not oddball words. They might not fit into a sort where you're targeting long vowels, but that doesn't mean the E is there because English is crazy. The E is there because it can't end in a V. So this is where, when we have commercially available resources, we just need to be mindful of the story we're telling as we're explaining this to our students. E can do more than one job at a time. See, it's wearing its superhero cape. So in the word bathe, it is making the A long and voicing the TH. In the word face, it's making the A long and it's softening the C. In the word brave, it's making the A long and it's preventing the word from ending in a V. It's a great multitasker. Now, the other job of E, and I know I'm going to run out of time, and I apologize if you have to jet, I totally get it. The other job of E related to structural is what I call, or what we call, plural canceling. It's sometimes called suffix canceling, which is a little confusing to me. But basically, we try to avoid having content words end in a single S unless it's plural or a third person present tense verb. So the difference between T's, as in T-E-A-S, more than one kind of tea, oh geez, versus T's with an E on the end. So I know we're not talking about more than one kind of tea, and we're talking about something else. Now, even when we get into a situation where we don't have a ner in English, we still put the E on the end because we don't want our brains, as we're reading, to have to pause and be like, what's a ner and why is there more than one of them at the hospital? The E is there so our brain quickly knows, oh, it's not a plural. Okay, so that's what the E is doing in all of those words. The other thing that E can do, which I think is super cool, is lexical in nature, and it makes content words, because English content words are written with at least 3 letters. One of the theories is that we want the content words, which are the ones that we stress in English speaking, that have the meaning or the importance behind them, we want them to stand out on the page, so they have to be the longer words. Whereas the function words tend to be as short as possible. So be, or, do, by, all of these things could be spelled without the E on the end. But when you have a situation where you've got homophones, the longer of the word, so BE 2 letters, BEE 3 letters, the 3-letter one will be the content word, and the 2-letter one is the function word. My favorite story is related to the word I, because the Y, like think of the word my, the Y is representing the I sound. But to talk about your eyeball, we can't just put a letter Y on the page. It's not long enough. So we put an E on the front and the back to make it at least 3 letters long. So fun. Content words are like pretty much all of the words that can be defined easily. Function words are the ones that we struggle to kind of define. The, in, he, she, like pronouns are considered function words. Function words have a finite list, like it's a list that doesn't typically grow. The ones that are there have always kind of been there, whereas content words we constantly evolve and add to. Of the lists, the content words are the biggest ones. Function words are the shorter ones. Function words tend to be sight words or high frequency words, because in our stressed language, we typically rush through them as we're speaking. And so students typically don't hear, or we don't represent that phoneme grapheme correspondence that we would expect to see in the word, because we're too busy talking through them to get to the content words. So if you think about the statement or the sentence, I'm going to the store, going and store and I, but definitely going store would be the key words there. No one says, I am going to the store. We don't put equal stress on every word. And so because of that, function words are ones that we sometimes have difficulty spelling because we're not making those same connections. So we just learned multiple things that E can do. So here's your action item for next day. Have a conversation with your students, whether they are in grade 9 or age 9, about the many jobs of marker E.